Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Is a trustworthy friend better than a wife or not? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy the show! Jason Chandler sat on the couch, staring at his phone. Earlier that day, his private investigator had informed him that his wife, Karen, and her lover had just boarded a plane to Honolulu. He knew they planned to spend a week there, although she had told him something completely different. This was just the latest in a long line of lies and bad decisions on her part. He wondered how he could have been so stupid and blind for almost 10 years. He had given everything to build a life with Karen, but now it was all gone. He took another sip of his coffee and leaned back, closing his eyes. He thought about the past decade. He met Karen 13 years ago in college. They both studied at the business faculty and were in the same study group, which led to them starting to date. They eventually fell in love and got married after graduation. He went to work for his father, who owned a chain of successful tire stores throughout the state. He always worked for his father, spending his summer holidays in one of the many stores his father owned. Sometimes he worked in the workshop, replacing tires and brakes, and sometimes as a courier, delivering tires and parts to local stores. As a result, he learned a lot about business. After college, his father persuaded him to work at the headquarters in the accounting department. Over the years, Jason had proven he could handle any task and was now the head of the accounting department, working directly under Mike Allen, the CFO, who was about to retire in a couple of years. Jason knew it was his father's dream to pass the company on to him when he retired, and he was aware that when Mike left, he would be promoted to his position. Meanwhile, Karen got a job as a real estate agent after the wedding. She went to school and received a license to sell real estate. She was excellent at her job and made good money, even in tougher years when the market wasn't performing well. They had a good life, or so he thought. They saved and were able to buy a nice house in the suburbs. Each had a decent, almost new car, and from the outside, it seemed they had a strong family. They didn't have children, which upset him more than it did her. Now he thought it was a blessing in disguise. In the beginning, Karen said she had problems with her tubes, so she had them tied. He consoled her and suggested that she consider adoption, but Karen rejected the idea. Eventually, he accepted that they would never have children. But over the past year, several events had occurred that made him think something was happening, something that would change his relationship with Karen forever. For starters, Karen began spending more time with her friends than ever before. He never objected to her spending time with her friends, knowing how stressful her job was. However, the fortnightly fun hours, which used to last until 7 p.m., had become a 2 or 3 time weekly event. Depending on the day, she might not get home until midnight or later. Jason was unhappy about this and expressed his displeasure, but she brushed him off, saying that there was a lot of stress at work and she needed to relax a little. One evening, when she returned home with her hair disheveled and her clothes smelling of cigarette smoke, he asked, "What are you doing before midnight?" "Oh, we just had a couple of cocktails," she said. "Sometimes we even dance if we want." "Look, Jace, it's none of your business. I'm a grown woman and don't need you telling me what to do, so leave it at that, okay?" Jason looked at her in shock. She had never spoken to him like that before. Seeing the expression on his face, she softened. "Sorry, Jace," she said. "I didn't mean to yell at you. There's just a lot of pressure at work because of the market." "You've dealt with tough times in the market before, and it didn't bother you," he said. "What's different this time?" "You have no idea how hard it is sometimes," she said. "The competition is getting tougher, and management is putting more pressure on us to sell properties." "I understand, honey," he said. "But don't take it out on me. I'm on your side, remember?" She smiled and hugged him. "You're right, honey. Please accept my apologies." "Okay, I accept," he said. "But please take a shower or something. No offense, but you smell like an ashtray." "Sorry," she said. "There were a lot of smokers at the club. I'll go take a shower." He went to bed and was already asleep when she came to bed. There were other changes over the next few months. Their intimate life had sharply declined. They used to make love 3 to 4 times a week, but that dropped to twice a week, and then to once every 2 weeks, if he was lucky. To make matters worse, her attitude towards him had changed. She used to always be interested in his work and hobbies, but now it seemed like she didn't care about what he said. Then there was the day he caught her outright lying. One day, he decided to stop by her office to invite her to lunch. When he arrived, he was told that she had left to show a property. That evening, when Karen returned home from whatever she was doing with the girls, he asked her about her day. "I was in the office all day," she said. "I had a lot of paperwork, so I took a sandwich from the machine." Jason was shocked. She had lied to his face. As far as he knew, this was the first time she had lied to him. He thought about pressing her, but decided against it. In her condition, she would probably throw a tantrum, and he was too tired to handle it. He began to wonder how many times she had lied to him. Later that night, as they lay in bed, he rolled over and looked at her. Seeing the concern on his face, she asked, "What's wrong, Jace?" "I'm worried," he said. "About what?" she asked. "About us," he said. "I feel like we are drifting apart. Do you still love me?" "Of course I do, darling," she said, hugging him. "You know that, right?" "Honestly, I don't know," he said. "I don't remember the last time you said that to me, and it's been a long time since we had an intim. It seems like you're rarely at home." "I'm sorry," she said. "It's just pressure at work. I love you. Please believe me." "Can you start showing me this a little more?" he asked. "Of course, honey," she said, kissing his face. They made love that night, and Jason felt better, but was still worried. Things went back to normal for a month or so, but the same pattern began to repeat itself. "What the hell is going on?" he asked himself. This became clear to him the day his longtime friend, Ron Green, called him, asking if he could get away for a while. "Sure, I can meet you for a beer," Jason said. "What's happened?" "Can't tell over the phone, Jace," Ron said. "But it's important." "Okay," Jason said. "Meet me at 5:30 if that suits you." They ended the call, and Jason met Ron at the bar that evening. Jason wasn't too worried about being late since Karen was almost always out until 6 o'clock or 7 p.m., sometimes later. "Okay, buddy," Jason said, sipping his beer. "Spit it out." "What's happening?" "Jace," Ron began, "I saw your wife today while I was doing my business." "Yes?" Jason asked. "She sells real estate, right?" "She was probably showing some property," Ron said. "I'm sure," said Ron, "but I never thought that selling real estate involved kissing and holding hands." "What?" Jason asked. "Come on, are you kidding?" Ron said. "I wish I was kidding, mate. I was driving down Riverside Drive and saw your wife leaving a house with some man." "It can't be," Jason said. "Are you sure you're talking about my Karen?" Ron pulled out his phone and showed Jason a photo. Of course, it was Karen kissing the man who was holding her fifth place. "Damn," Jason said quietly, handing the phone back. "Can you email me this photo?" "Sure," Ron said, pressing a few buttons on his phone. "And what are you going to do?" Ron asked. Jason shook his head. "I don't know, buddy," he said. "Things have been weird lately, but I never thought she could do something like this." "I have a friend who works as a private investigator," Ron said. "If you want, I can set you up with him." "Come on," Jason said. "I need to know what the hell is going on." They said goodbye and left the bar. Karen was in the kitchen when he returned home. This was something new, he thought. "You're back early," she said, kissing him. "I'm not complaining, by the way." "Where have you been?" he asked. "I had a beer with Ron," he said. "I didn't expect you to be back so early, so I thought, why not?" "Is everything okay with your friend?" she asked. "Not really," Jason said. "He just found out that one of his friend's wives is cheating on her husband." "About?" she asked. "Yes," Jason said. "He saw her kissing and holding hands with some guy today." Jason thought he saw her flinch a little. "Well," she said, "maybe he's exaggerating." "I don't know," Jason said. I'm just glad I don't have that problem. Again, it seemed to him that she flinched a little at these words. It would kill me if you ever did something like that to me, she said, hugging him. I would never do that to you. I love you too much. I'm glad to hear that, he said, kissing her beautiful face. So why are you back so early? Well, we have our annual company conference coming up, she said. I thought I'd start packing and want to spend the next night or two with you since we'll be separated for a few days. This year, it's in Las Vegas. Where exactly? He asked. At the convention center, she said. We will all be staying at the Westgate Resort. I heard that's a 4-star hotel, he said. When are you leaving? He asked. Friday afternoon, she said. It's the day after tomorrow. Are you winning the award again this year? He asked. Probably, she said. They kissed again. Well then, he said, why don't I take you upstairs and congratulate you on another successful year? She smiled and took his hand. I thought you would never ask, she said. They spent the evening making love, but Jason had other things on his mind. Would she cheat on him this weekend? He asked himself. Listen, I have vacation time, he said. Why don't I take a couple of days off and go with you? Maybe we can spend a week in Vegas, relax, and reconnect. Our 10-year anniversary is next week, you know. Sounds fun, she said, but I will be so busy with seminars and meetings that we will hardly see each other. In addition, I'm expected to immediately return to work after the conference. Look, why don't we celebrate our anniversary when I get back? I promise I will make it up to you. Okay, he said. I'm counting on it. The next day, he contacted Ron and received the private investigator's name and number. He made an appointment for that day and went there before lunch. Good morning, Mr. Breeson Chandler, the older man said as Jason walked into his cluttered office. Nice to meet you. Ron said you could call me Jerry, the investigator said. How can I help? Jason explained the situation and talked about Karen's upcoming trip to Las Vegas. Vegas, you say? Jerry asked. Do you think she's going to meet someone at the conference? I don't know, Jason said. Maybe. Well, I have connections there who owe me a favor or two, Jerry said. Listen, we'll keep an eye on her there. If you want, we can put a camera and microphone in her room. If you give me her room number, it will cost more, you know. I thought so, Jason said. But I need to know the truth. Jerry pulled out a digital audio recorder and handed it to Jason. It's very easy to use, Jerry said. It's voice activated, so all you have to do is put it under her seat in the car and turn it on. You can pick it up later when she leaves. I'm guessing she'll leave her car at the airport, that's what she usually does. Great, Jason said. Don't worry. We've got it all covered. If she's really cheating, we'll know. By the way, here's my personal number in case you have any information. Call anytime. Thank you, Jason said, writing the check from his personal account rather than the general account. Both he and Karen had their own personal accounts separate from the general account used to pay bills. They had agreed on this many years ago, promising to contribute no more than 10% of their net income. So far, Jason had used his funds for clothes, incidentals, and gifts for Karen. He had been saving for a cruise, but now he was using the money for something else. That evening, Karen finished packing for her trip. Jason offered to carry her bags to the car, an offer she gladly accepted. That would be a big help, she said, kissing him. He carried the bags to her car, placing them in the trunk. He couldn't help but notice how much stuff she took with her. This was clearly more than needed for the weekend. When he put her travel bag in the trunk, he couldn't resist the urge to see what she had packed and opened the suitcase. He immediately noticed the container with her birth control pills. There were only 10 tablets left. Damn it, he thought. Why is she on birth control pills? Didn't she say her tubes were tied? Or was it another lie? He looked at the clothes she packed. Some seemed appropriate for a business meeting, but many looked like clubwear, mini dresses he'd never seen before, and lacy lingerie. He also noticed a pair of very skimpy bikinis, one of which looked like a sling bikini he had only seen online. What the hell is this? He asked himself. He took out his phone and took photos. Opening her car door, he placed the audio recorder under her seat and made sure it was on. He then closed the car doors and made sure everything was locked. They made love that night, perhaps, Jason thought, for the last time as husband and wife. The next morning, Karen gave him her room number and promised to call him every night. "I love you," she said, kissing his cheek. "I love you too," he said. He watched her drive away. When he got to work, he called Jerry and gave him her room number. "Great," Jerry said. "Thank you. I will immediately put my people on this matter." After lunch, Karen called him, saying that she was at the airport getting ready to take off. "I'll call when I check into the hotel," she said. "I would be grateful," he said. "Remember, I love you." "I love you too, baby," she said. "I'll miss you." "Of course you will," he thought sarcastically. "I miss you too," he said instead. After finishing the call, he saw his father standing at the door. "Is everything okay, son?" his father asked. "You look like your dog died." "I don't know, Dad," Jason said. His father entered the office and closed the door. "Is everything okay at home? Do you want to talk about it?" his father asked. Jason knew better than to try to hide anything from his father, so he told him everything he knew so far. "That doesn't sound very good," his father said. "I would never suspect her of cheating." "Me too, Dad," Jason said. "Listen, if there's anything Mom or I can do, let me know." The older man said, "We're here for you." "Thanks, Dad," Jason said. "I appreciate it." Jason left work a couple of hours early and drove to the airport to find Karen's car. He found her car in a short-term parking lot and took out the audio recorder. Looking around, he noticed that the rest of the car was clean, as Karen always kept it. On his way home, Karen called him. "Hey, baby," she said. "I just wanted to let you know I got here okay." "Thanks for letting me know," he said. "I'm just settling in," she added. "I'll call you later in the evening. Love you." "And I love you," he said. When he got home, he turned on the audio recorder. He hoped there would be nothing on it, and mostly there was just the noise of the road and the sound of her radio. About halfway through the recording, however, he heard the conversation that confirmed his worst fears. Her phone rang, and since it was connected to her car via Bluetooth, the audio came through the speakers. He could hear both sides of the conversation. "Hi, baby," said a male voice. "Hi, handsome," she replied. "Handsome?" Jason thought. "Who is this clown?" "I can't wait to see you again," the man said. "Last week was fantastic." "Glad you liked it," she said with a playful laugh. "Have we agreed on next week?" "Next week?" Jason thought, shocked. "Everything is settled," the man said. "Did you tell your husband?" "Not yet," she replied. "Don't worry, honey. I have everything under control." "He doesn't suspect anything, does he?" the man asked. "Not a bit," she said. "As always, he doesn't understand anything." "I hope you're right," he said. "I told you, don't worry," she said. "He'll believe anything I tell him." "Okay," the man said. "Listen, I'm almost at the airport. See you at the hotel tonight," she said. "Okay?" "I can't wait," he said. "Bye, darling." "Bye," she said, ending the call. Jason stared at the recorder, not believing what he had just heard. He played the recording again to make sure he wasn't taking anything out of context. Not only was she cheating on him, but she was planning something for next week, right around their 10th anniversary, and it didn't include him. Damn it, he thought. How long has this been going on? And who is this man she's sleeping with? He grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down at his desk, thinking back over the past few months. Had he really been so blind as to miss all the signs? He started wondering what else she might be hiding. Until now, he had always respected her personal space and never looked through her things. But now, it didn't matter. She no longer deserved his trust. He knew that Karen kept her desk locked, but he also knew where she hid the key. He went into their bedroom and opened the small drawer in her jewelry box. Sure enough, there was the key, along with a few others on a key ring. He took the ring and went to her office. Unlocking her desk, he began looking through her files. Normally, he would never invade her privacy like this, but now he felt justified. What he found shocked him. It seemed Karen had been lying to him their entire marriage. He pulled out a folder of bank statements and was stunned to see how much she had saved from her salary. He knew how much she contributed to their joint account and was shocked to see that she had been depositing well over 10% into her personal account, which now held over $250,000. Looking through her recent purchases, he saw that she had bought a very expensive men's Rolex watch, along with other lavish gifts. No doubt these were for her lover, as she had never bought him anything like that. She had also purchased expensive clothing online, including revealing lingerie from Victoria's Secret, none of which he had ever seen her wear. But that wasn't all. He found medical bills from a Planned Parenthood clinic, showing that Karen had gotten pregnant twice in the last 2 years and had undergone abortions both times, paying cash from her personal account. He wondered if any of those pregnancies were his. He also found receipts for birth control pills, which she had been regularly purchasing for the last 4 years. Worse yet, he found a receipt for Plan B emergency contraception, dated just earlier this week. And there was more. Among her papers was a receipt for a large down payment on an apartment in a wealthy part of the city. Was this her love nest? He asked himself. Or was this part of her plan to leave him? There were also utility bills and invoices for new furniture. He glanced at the ring of keys he had taken and wondered if one of them was for this apartment. He intended to find out. Next, he turned on her computer. He knew that she always wrote down her passwords and soon found a piece of paper taped to the bottom of her keyboard with her login information. He tried the first one, and the computer unlocked. Opening her browser, he found a link to an online email service and logged in. Sure enough, the email client opened, displaying her inbox. She seemed so confident he would never spy on her that she had saved her username and password in the system. He began scrolling through her emails and was horrified by what he found. There were numerous messages from someone named Greg Wilson. Almost all of the emails were explicit, with Greg commenting on how much he enjoyed having a night with Karen. Her responses were similar. Jason noticed that the emails had been going on for almost a year, around the time he first noticed changes in her behavior. Apparently, their meetings initially took place in hotel rooms, but then they started meeting in houses she was selling. He found an email from about 6 months ago that partially answered one of his questions. "Have you solved this little problem?" Greg asked. "Yes," Karen replied. "I had an abortion today." "Too bad you didn't leave him," Greg wrote. "You could have passed it off as Jason's baby." "I couldn't do it," she replied. "As far as he knows, I can't have children." Jason thought about that time and realized it was around when he first caught her lying. Lying, deceitful, cheating. He continued to look through the emails. At one point, Greg suggested they have an intimate in Karen's marital bed, but she refused. "I won't do that to Jason," she wrote in one email. "Come on, the dumbass doesn't even know what's going on," Greg replied. "No," she answered. "I won't do that." "What if you had your own place?" Greg asked. "You could buy a condo with your commission money, and your husband would never know." "You might be right," she replied. "I have my own account, and Jason never asks about it. Let me see what's available." This was 3 months ago. The down payment check was dated just over a month ago. "I bought a condo," she wrote to him. "I just made a down payment, and the new furniture will arrive in a week. Jason doesn't know anything." "Great," Greg replied. "We must baptize every room in this place." Jason leaned back in his chair, shocked by this revelation. He continued to read through the emails. "So, why do you stay with your husband?" Greg asked. "Why not leave him and move into the condo?" "Believe it or not, I still have feelings for him," Karen wrote. "He may be a boring accountant for a tire chain, but I like him. And he's nice to me. I bought the condo so we could have a place to hang out without risking being seen at a hotel. Besides, Greg wrote, you're still married. Listen, honey, say the word and I'll leave Christy in a heartbeat. She's already driving me nuts. We'll see what happens after the conference, Karen replied. After the conference? Jason thought. What will happen after the conference? Jason began copying her emails and taking photos of the receipts he found. Suddenly, his phone rang and Karen's name appeared on the display. Hello, he said, answering the call. It's me, honey, Karen said. Are you okay? You sound a little off. My head is pounding, he replied, not wanting her to know that he had figured everything out. Well, I just wanted to let you know I'm settling in for the night, she said. Take something for your headache and rest. I love you and miss you. Yeah, me too, he said. Bye. He ended the call, wondering if she noticed that he didn't specifically say he loved and missed her. The truth was, he was close to punching a hole in the wall. He decided he needed to find out who Greg really was, so he started searching on the website of the company where Karen worked. Sure enough, he found him, Greg Wilson, a regional manager at the real estate company where Karen worked. In other words, she was sleeping with her boss. Jason printed out Greg's profile and added it to his growing pile of evidence. Unable to rest, he decided to check out her condo. He had the address but wondered if she had installed a security system. After searching through her paperwork, he found a series of numbers next to the word alarm. Of course, she had written it down. She wrote everything down. Grabbing a pair of latex gloves from the garage, he set off, determined not to leave any trace. He easily found the condo complex and parked in Karen's designated spot. Walking to the door, he put on his gloves and tried one of the keys from the ring he had found in her jewelry box. The door opened, and he stepped inside. He saw the alarm console on the wall next to the door and entered the code he had found in her documents, ensuring the alarm was off. Turning on the lights, he looked around the condo and was impressed by Karen's taste in furniture. She always had good taste, he thought, too bad she wasn't as faithful as she was stylish. Naturally, there were no pictures of him anywhere, he hadn't expected any. After all, this was her love nest, her escape from their marriage. Walking into the kitchen, he noticed she had even stocked it with dishes and cutlery. The refrigerator was nearly empty, and the pantry wasn't much better, but the condo was fully furnished, complete with exquisite floral paintings on the walls and a large flat-screen TV mounted in the living room. He moved to the master bedroom, which was also fully furnished. Long lace curtains hung from the windows, flowing to the floor. She had always loved lace curtains. She had hung them throughout their home. Looking down, he couldn't help but notice that the curtains were hanging directly above the electric baseboard heater. He shook his head, wondering if Karen had thought about the potential fire hazard. Opening the dresser drawers, he found lingerie he had never seen before, along with men's underwear, which he suspected belonged to Greg. He also found an assortment of intimate toys. Taking out his phone, he snapped a few photos. In her bedside table, he discovered a card addressed to Karen. Opening it, he saw it was from Greg. Just wanted to say thank you for the watch, the card read. I can't wait for the housewarming. It was signed, Love, Greg. Jason felt a surge of anger, imagining Greg's hand in his and wanting to beat his cheating wife with it. He found more clothes, both men's and women's, hanging in the closet. In the master bathroom, he noticed 2 toothbrushes by the sink and his and hers towels on the counter next to the shower. He took more photos with his phone. The second bedroom contained only a small table and chair, with a network cable running to suggest she used it for her laptop. There were several letters addressed to Karen on the table, all from utility companies. He photographed them, making sure Karen's name and address were clearly visible. Like the master bedroom, this room also had long lace curtains hanging to the floor, directly in front of the electric baseboard heater. As he continued looking around, he noticed other potential fire or safety hazards. No smoke alarms in the bedrooms, and the one in the kitchen looked ancient. He wondered if there was even a battery in it. Satisfied that everything was as he had found it, he turned off the lights, reactivated the security system, and locked the door before leaving. He returned to his car and headed home, pondering his next steps. divorce seemed the obvious solution. Even if Karen got rid of the apartment and ended her relationship with Greg, he could never trust her again. However, he knew that men often got the worst of it financially in divorces. Since she earned significantly more than him, he hoped this would spare him from paying alimony. He decided to wait until he consulted a lawyer before taking any further action. He also hoped that the fact Karen had bought the condo in her name meant he wouldn't have to give her the house or sell it and split the proceeds. They had no children, so there would be no custody battles, but he still wanted to make Greg and Karen pay for what they had done. Violence was out of the question. He wasn't about to go to prison for this. When he got home, he looked up Greg Wilson in the phone book and found a listing. Hoping it was the right Greg Wilson, he dialed the number. Wilson residence, a female voice answered. "Is this Mrs. S. Wilson?" Jason asked. "Yes, it is," the woman replied. "Who is this?" "My name is Jason Chandler." "Is your husband a regional manager for Acme Real Estate?" "Yes, he is," she answered, "but he's away at a conference this weekend and won't be back until next week, as he's visiting other offices. You'll need to leave a message at the regional office." "Actually, Mrs. Wilson, I'd like to speak with you," Jason said. "About what?" she asked, her tone cautious. "I hate to say this, but my wife is having an affair with your husband." "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Yeah, I'm sure," Jason replied. "And I can prove it." "Do you have irrefutable evidence?" she pressed. "I can even show you where they meet if you want," Jason offered. He heard her sigh over the phone. "Is tomorrow okay?" "Of course," Jason said. "What time works for you?" "How about 1 p.m., she suggested. They agreed on the time and exchanged directions to Karen's condo. "See you there," Jason said, ending the call. Smiling grimly, he sat at his desk and made a to-do list. First, he decided to change the locks on his house. He could handle that in time to meet Greg's wife at Karen's apartment. The thought of getting drunk that night crossed his mind, but he pushed it aside. Instead, he grabbed a slice of cold pizza and ate it while considering all his options. After finishing his pizza, he headed to bed. The next morning, Jason got up early and went to the hardware store, where he bought everything he needed to change the locks. By noon, he had finished the job. After a quick shower, he gathered the audio recorder and the printed emails from Karen's account and headed to her apartment to meet Greg's wife. When he arrived, he parked in Karen's spot and noticed an attractive woman with dark hair sitting in a Toyota Corolla nearby. He approached the car and knocked on the window. She rolled it down and looked at him. "Are you Christy Wilson?" he asked. She nodded. "That's me." "You must be Jason Chandler," she said. "That's right," he replied, opening the car door. "Come on, I'll show you their love nest. But first, put these on," he added, handing her a pair of latex gloves. "I don't want to leave fingerprints." "Good idea," she said. They walked to the door, and Jason used the key he had made to unlock it. He was glad to see it worked. They turned off the security alarm and went inside. Jason led her to the bedroom, opening drawers and the closet so she could see Greg's clothes. "Oh my God," she said. "I've been looking for some of these things for the past couple of weeks. I wondered where his clothes went." "Has your husband been wearing a Rolex lately?" Jason asked. She nodded. "Yes," she replied. "He said it was a gift from management." Jason shook his head and took the card from Karen's nightstand. He opened it and showed it to her. She read the note and began to cry. "Is this his handwriting?" Jason asked. "Yes," she answered, sobbing. "There's more," he said, pulling out emails and an audio recording. She read the emails, and tears streamed down her cheeks. He then played the audio recording from Friday. "I'm sorry about all this," he said, hugging her. He felt the urge to cry himself but held back. "It's not your fault," she said. "I suspected something like this for a while, but I had no proof." After a while, she pulled herself together and looked at him. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to divorce her," he replied. "And you?" I'm kicking that little rat out of the house the moment I see him, she said. Suddenly, she stopped crying and looked at him with a glimmer in her eyes. I have an idea. What kind of idea? He asked. They want to live here together, right? Why don't we help them? She asked. What do you mean? I mean, why don't we pack up their things and bring them here? She answered. Jason thought for a moment, then smiled. I like this idea, he said. But we have to hurry. They'll be back in a day or two. She shook her head. Greg said he'd be gone for a week after the conference, she said. I bet she'll find an excuse to be away too. Jason suddenly remembered the recorded conversation, where Karen specifically asked Greg if everything was ready for the next week, but hadn't said what they were planning. Damn, he said. I think you're right. Anyway, I want to get her stuff out of my house as soon as possible. I agree, she said. Meet me back here in 3 hours, Jason said. I'll just throw her things into trash bags, so I should be able to do it in time. See you later, she said, standing up. Jason watched her for a moment. She was shorter than Karen, with a girl next door look that added to the charm of her figure. He thought Greg was an idiot for cheating on her. They left the condo and returned about 3 hours later, their cars filled with bags of their spouse's belongings. They carried the bags into the condo and dumped them in the nearly empty second bedroom, not caring what might break. They knew the cheaters would have to spend hours sorting it all out. I don't know about you, but I wasn't particularly careful with his stuff, she said. He laughed. Me neither, Jason replied. They laughed and playfully slapped each other's hands. He looked at her and said, I don't know about you, but I'm hungry. Me too, she replied. I could go for a juicy hamburger. A big, thick cheeseburger sounds good to me too, he said. I know a place. Come with me. My treat, she offered. Lead the way, he said. He followed her to a bar that he and his friend Ron frequented. After parking, Christy looked up at the building. A bar? She asked. Trust me, he said. They make the best burgers here. You'll love it. Okay, she replied, smiling. He laughed. As tempting as it sounds, I wouldn't do that to you. Damn, she said, laughing. They went inside, ordered burgers, fries, and beer. As they ate, they swapped stories about their failed marriages. Her story was similar to his. They had met in college and married shortly after. However, she had wanted children, while Greg hadn't. He had started working at Acme Real Estate, and she had taken a job in the accounts receivable department at a home improvement company. Are you an accountant? He asked. She shook her head. No, I haven't reached that level yet, but I hope to someday. He told her about his work and background. We're always looking for good people, he said. If you send me your resume, maybe we can help each other. I might just do that, Mr. P. Chandler, she said, taking a bite of her burger. At that moment, his phone rang. He saw it was Karen calling and answered. Hi, he said in a neutral tone. Hi, honey, Karen replied. He realized she had been drinking. What are you doing? She asked. Oh, just sitting at a bar, eating a burger, he replied. What are you up to? Guess what? She said excitedly. I won the Best Salesperson award. I'm happy for you, he said. Yeah. And they want me to stay here in Vegas next week to work with the agents, she said. Of course, Jason already knew this was a lie. Isn't that wonderful? They say I might be promoted to management. Karen added. No doubt on his back, Jason thought to himself. That's great, he said aloud. But what about our anniversary? It's already Wednesday. I know, and I'm so sorry, she said. Maybe we'll celebrate next week. Don't worry, he said. I know your job is important to you, and I wouldn't want you to miss out on a big deal. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. Nothing, he replied. It's just that you only celebrate 10 years of marriage once, but I understand how much your work means to you. Don't worry about it. Well, yes, my job is important to me, but I thought you would be happy for me, she said. I am happy, he told her. Work with your agents. Don't worry about me. I love you, she said. Okay, he told her. Me too. Bye. With those words, he ended the call and looked at Christy. That's it, he told her. She shook her head. She really chooses Greg over your anniversary? Christy said, placing her hand on his. He almost cried. Here was a woman he barely knew who cared more about him than his own wife. Thank you, he said, trying to smile. He took out Jerry's card and called his personal number. Jerry, he said when the older man answered, this is Jason Chandler. I just talked to Karen, and she told me she's staying in Vegas next week. And I guess you don't believe her? Jerry asked. Not for a minute, Jason said. Well, I was just working on your report, but I might as well have my guys keep an eye on them and see what they do, Jerry said. We can start with that. I heard the conference ended a couple of hours ago, and now they've completely turned their attention to the party. Most return home tomorrow. By the way, your wife and her lover spent the night together yesterday. I have a video I think you might find interesting. I can email it to you if you want. Everything will be in my report. That would be great, Jerry, Jason said. Thank you. He ended the call and looked at Christy. Well, tomorrow we'll find out what's really going on. They spent the night together, and my detective will email me the video. Do you want to watch it with me? Not really, she said, but I feel like I should. He nodded, understanding. Let's go to my house, he said, standing up. After Jason paid for the food, they left the bar and went to his house. By the time they settled into his office, the video was already in his email. Would you like something to drink before we watch this? He asked. Of course, she replied. Coca-Cola, if you have it. One Coca-Cola, coming right up, he said, heading to the kitchen. He returned with 2 cold Cokes and handed one to her. Christy and Jason held back tears as they watched their spouses with each other. Even more damaging were the conversations after night. What do you think our spouses are doing now? Karen asked. Well, if I know Christy, she's probably watching one of her boring movies, Greg replied. Or maybe reading one of those stupid books. Yes, I know what you mean, she said. I imagine Jason is probably playing with one of his dumb spreadsheets or looking at stock reports. Greg laughed. You'd think he was saving the world or something. God, his dad's company sells tires, for God's sake. What could be so important about that? So, have you figured out what you're going to say to the idiot after the awards ceremony tomorrow? Greg asked. Yes, she replied. I'll just tell him I've been asked to stay in Vegas for a week to supervise the local reps. He'll believe it. Damn it, he'll believe anything I tell him. I could say the moon is made of green cheese, and he would believe it. By the time he figures it out, we'll be on the beach in Hawaii. Christy was furious. Hawaii, she screamed. Is this damn idiot going to take her to Hawaii? I'll tear him apart. She looked at Jason. I'm sorry I called your wife a. Don't apologize, he said. I'd call her the same. They turned back to the video. So, Greg continued, what about your anniversary? Are you just going to ignore it? Hawaii seems like a lot more fun to me than a night out at a steakhouse, she said. I promised I'd make it up to him. Maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. Greg looked at her. You're cold, you know. She shrugged. It's just our 10th anniversary. Who cares? I need you in me right now, she said. With that, they started having a night again, and Jason stopped the video. I've seen enough, Jason said. And you? Christy nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. More than enough, she said. I'll make an appointment on Monday to see a divorce lawyer. Do you want to come with me? Jason asked. You don't mind? She asked quietly. Not at all, he answered. Christy burst into tears. Jason hugged her and let her cry on his shoulder. He, too, wanted to cry, but he held back. He consoled her as best as he could, struggling with his own emotions. Do you mind if I stay here with you tonight? She asked. No, intim. I just don't want to be alone. Of course you can stay, he said. Stay for at least a week if you want. Thank you, she replied. I can't believe I gave this idiot so many years. All this time, I believed his nonsense. I totally understand, Jason said. He walked her upstairs to the guest bedroom and found an old t-shirt long enough for her to wear for the night. She took the t-shirt and went to the bathroom to change. He changed into his pajamas while he waited for her to return. Jason went to bed as Christy came out of the bathroom, wearing nothing but his old t-shirt. He almost gasped when he saw her. He had always thought Karen had beautiful legs, but Christy's legs were the most beautiful he had ever seen. She smiled as she crawled under the covers. What's the matter? She asked. Never seen a woman's legs before? I've never seen any as beautiful as yours, Jason replied. Flattery will get you everywhere, sir, she joked. He hugged her and held her close, inhaling her scent. She placed her hand on his chest and pressed herself against him. Do you know that you're the only woman, other than my wife, that I've been in bed with in the last 10 years? He asked. And you're the only man I've been with, besides my husband, she replied. They looked into each other's eyes for what seemed like an eternity. Then Christy leaned over and kissed Jason tenderly on the lips. He realized what could happen and pulled back. He didn't want to do to Karen what she had done to him. Apparently, Christy felt the same way. She laid her head on his shoulder without saying a word, and they fell asleep like that. Good morning, sleepyhead, she said. You don't have to move for me. Jason, now realizing the situation, quickly stood up to use the bathroom. Good morning, beautiful, he replied. I'll be right back. He went to the bathroom and relieved himself, though it was a bit difficult, considering the state of his manhood. By the time he returned, Christy was already in the kitchen, making them breakfast. As Jason looked at the clock on the wall, he saw that it was 8:30 a.m. His attention returned to Christy, who was cooking in his old t-shirt. He loved watching her. For a moment, he remembered the happier times when Karen used to make him breakfast every morning. Damn, it smells delicious, he said. Do you mind that I used your kitchen? She asked. I don't mind at all, he replied. I can't remember the last time someone made breakfast for me. Karen didn't cook for you? She asked, surprised. At first, yes, he answered. But she stopped making breakfast a long time ago. She said it was taking too long, and she needed to look presentable for clients. Typical, Christy muttered. I agree, he said. He inhaled the aroma of bacon as she placed a large plate in front of him. Jason ate like a man who hadn't eaten in a month. Damn, this is so good. Do you cook like this every day? Whenever possible, she replied. Jason's phone vibrated. Looking at the screen, he saw Jerry's name and number, so he answered. Good morning, Jerry, he said. Do you work on Sundays? Jerry laughed. More often than I'd like, he replied. I just wanted to let you know that your wife and her lover boarded a flight from Las Vegas a little before 6 a.m. They had a layover in Los Angeles, and the plane took off from there about an hour ago. They'll land in Honolulu in about 5 hours. I have the flight information if you need it. Go ahead, Jason replied, grabbing a pen. They're on American Airlines flight number 31, Jerry said. I have a person in Honolulu who will keep an eye on them when they arrive. Thanks, Jerry, Jason said as he wrote down the details. He ended the call and looked at Christy. Well, they're on their way to Hawaii, he said. Meanwhile, Karen sat back in her seat after the plane took off, staring out the window as they flew over the Pacific Ocean. This is it, she thought to herself. Looking to her left, she saw Greg already fast asleep in the chair next to her. She closed her eyes for a moment and thought about the last 10 years. For a brief moment, she felt a pang of guilt for what she was doing to her husband, who had naively trusted her. Deep down, she knew this was just the latest in a series of bad decisions, but justifying herself, she thought she needed this. Ultimately, she believed it would all end without Jason ever knowing. Their marriage would continue, and they would eventually retire and grow old together. Her first bad decision was lying to Jason about not being able to have children. In fact, she could, but she simply didn't want to be a mother. The idea of motherhood might appeal to others, but not to her. So, she told Jason that medical complications had forced her to tie her tubes. He believed her, and eventually, he accepted it. But she had issues with her IUD and had to stop using it. The pelvic pain and headaches were too much, so she switched to standard birth control pills. She also started using the calendar method to avoid intim on her most fertile days. It worked most of the time, but she still got pregnant twice. The first time was with Jason. Fearing his reaction, which would expose her lie and her own desire to remain childless, she secretly had an abortion, paying for it out of her personal account. Fortunately, they had separate accounts as well as a joint one, and she constantly lied about her contributions, so Jason never knew. The second pregnancy was with Greg, about 6 months ago. She told her lover about it and decided to have another abortion, again paying for it from her own funds, hoping Jason would never find out. Then there were her infidelities. She had remained faithful to her husband for the first 7 years of their marriage, but one day, everything changed when she was with a client who turned out to be very attractive and wealthy. It was a spontaneous decision, but she never regretted it. They made passionate love in the master bedroom of the house she was showing, and he showed his gratitude by purchasing the house on the spot. She didn't do this often, maybe about 10 times over the next year and a half, but later learned that others in her line of work were doing the same thing. Of course, she felt a little guilty, but she thought, what the hell? If other girls could do it and avoid the consequences, so could I, as far as she was concerned, it had no effect on Jason. She never stopped loving him, and what he didn't know couldn't hurt him. Then she met Greg, and everything changed. He was everything her husband was not. Jason liked to analyze everything before making a decision, while Greg was spontaneous and made decisions on the fly. Jason's life and career were already determined long ago. He had worked for his father all his life and was now poised to become the CFO of his father's tire company, eventually becoming president and CEO. Greg, on the other hand, had no idea where he'd be in 5 years and lived for the moment. While Jason was always thinking about the future, Greg lived in the present. They were also very different in bed. Jason made love to her, focusing on her pleasure, while Greg simply took her. At first, they met at motels and hotels around town, or at houses she was showing, but she began to worry that someone might notice and inform either Jason or Greg's wife, Christy. Then came the evening when Jason expressed concern that they were growing apart. She got scared and cooled her relationship with Greg for a while, focusing all her love on her husband. But it didn't last long. Greg wanted to rekindle their affair, but she was afraid Jason might find out. She needed a solution and decided to buy her own condo. This way, she would have a special place for her and Greg. Greg had wanted to have an intimate with her in the bed she shared with her husband, but she refused. Although she thought Jason was a bit of a bore, she still had some feelings for him. It also helped that she and Jason had long ago decided to file separate tax returns. She could easily hide the condo from him while benefiting from tax deductions. It seemed like a win-win situation, at least, that's what she told herself. All of this led to her latest decision, to spend a week in Hawaii with Greg. She took a week off from work, claiming she was going to Hawaii with her husband after an annual company meeting. Greg, meanwhile, told his wife that he'd be away on a business trip next week, which was not uncommon for him. Karen lied to Jason, saying she would be in Vegas for a week. Of course, 1 or 2 phone calls could expose her, but luckily for her, she thought Jason believed everything she told him. The only downside was that she would miss their 10th anniversary celebration, but she promised herself she would make it up to him when she returned. And, she thought, all of this would remain her secret. She smiled as she looked at the blue water below them, thinking about Hawaii. Greg had bought her a very skimpy sling bikini for the trip. She took out her phone and checked for messages or calls. She wasn't surprised that Jason hadn't texted or called. He didn't like texting and preferred communicating by phone or in person. She chuckled to herself. Suddenly, she felt the plane shudder. She thought they might have hit turbulence. She felt the nose of the plane drop, and the sound of the engines changed. When she looked out the window, she realized something was wrong. Panic began to spread in the cabin, and she felt a force push her back into her seat. Looking out, she saw the plane was falling rapidly. Oh my God, she thought. Asterisk, this is the end. We're going to crash. I'm going to die. Asterisk, the oxygen masks dropped, and she heard other passengers, including Greg, screaming as the flight attendants tried to prepare them for the inevitable. With tears in her eyes, Karen made her final decision. Meanwhile, Jason and Christy had just finished breakfast and cleared the last of the dishes. They sat down at the table again and discussed their unfaithful spouses. Jason was impressed by Christy's ability to analyze the situation. He felt closer to her now than he had to Karen in months. He had just returned to the table with a second cup of coffee for them when his phone rang. He saw Karen's name and number, so he put the call on speaker. "Hello?" he asked. "Jason," he heard Karen cry. It was difficult to make out her words due to the noise and the sound of people screaming in the background. "Yes, Karen, what's going on?" he asked. "No time, the plane is crashing." "I'm sorry, forgive me," they heard before the call suddenly ended. Jason and Christy looked at each other, stunned. He tried calling Karen back, but her phone went straight to voicemail. "Try calling Greg," he told Christy. She ran to the front room and took her phone out of her purse. Jason watched as she dialed the number, but she shook her head. "It went straight to voicemail too," she said. Jason walked into his home office and turned on his computer. Once it was booted up, he did a search and found the airline's contact number. He called and received the standard responses, but eventually managed to speak with someone who confirmed that they were investigating reports of a plane crash. He left his name, number, and information about Karen and Greg, confident that someone would contact him. He also provided information about Christy so they could contact her. Jason did a quick Google search but found nothing. He guessed it would take at least an hour before any news surfaced. They went into the front room and turned on the TV, hoping for some kind of report. Jason flipped through the channels, but nothing was reported yet. He glanced at his phone, thinking about the events leading up to this moment. Finally, one news network reported that an American Airlines flight to Honolulu had crashed in the Pacific Ocean, but there were no details. "Oh my God," Christy said, covering her mouth. Jason hugged her and silently prayed that Karen would survive. He hated what she had done to their marriage, but he didn't want her dead. An hour later, his phone rang. He muted the TV and answered. "Mr. Chandler?" a woman asked. "Yes, it's me," he replied. "I wanted to let you know that your wife's plane has crashed," she said. "I don't have any more information at the moment, but we'll contact you as soon as we know more." "Thanks," Jason said, ending the call. He and Christy hugged and shed a few tears. A few minutes later, Christy's phone rang, and she was told the same information. Some time passed before Jason's father called, which wasn't unusual since his parents often contacted him when they heard big news. "Hi Jason," his father said. "Hi Dad, how are you?" he asked. "Just got back from church." "Did you see the news about the crash?" his father asked. "Yes, I did," Jason replied. "It's terrible," his father said. "By the way, how's Karen? Wasn't she supposed to be back from Vegas?" "She's not doing well right now, Dad," Jason said. "She was on the plane that crashed." "What?" his father asked, stunned. "What was she doing going to Hawaii without you?" "She was with her lover," Jason said. "Oh my God," the elder Chandler said. "I'm really sorry to hear that, son. Look, take a week off and get things sorted. I'll let Mike know. If you need anything, just call, okay?" "Thanks, Dad," Jason said, ending the call. His mind was filled with conflicting emotions. On the one hand, he was sad that Karen was most likely dead. On the other hand, he was furious at her for cheating on him, and angry at himself for not confronting her sooner. Strangely, he wasn't upset that her death meant no divorce. Then another thought hit him: he would have to sort out her latest expenses, including the condo. Damn, he thought. He looked at Christy and wondered how she was coping with all of this. What will she do? A thought occurred to him, and he approached her. "Christy," he said, "why don't you sell your house and move in with me?" Her eyes, still full of tears, widened. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Yes, seriously," he said. I have another bedroom upstairs, and you'll have a lot to deal with in the coming months. Maybe we could help each other through this." She thought for a minute before answering. "Why not?" she said. "But only on one condition." "What condition?" he asked. "You'll let me sleep with you," she said. "Seriously?" Jason asked. Things were moving much faster than he had anticipated, and he wondered if it was smart. But he pushed the thought aside and decided to take a chance. "Yes," she replied. "I haven't felt comfortable around my husband for a long time. Last night, I felt at peace for the first time in ages. Is that okay with you?" "More than okay," he said. "All right then," she said. "I'll go pack up my things and move in tonight." Jason nodded. "I'll be here," he said. After she left, he called Lucy, the woman who managed the office where Karen worked. "Hello," she answered. "Lucy, this is Jason Chandler," he said. "Oh, hi Jason," she replied. "How are things in Hawaii?" "I don't know," he said. "I hear it's beautiful this time of year." "Why do you ask?" "Well, Karen said you two would be heading there after the company meeting," Lucy said. "I thought you'd already left." "No," Jason replied. "She flew to Hawaii, but not with me. She flew with Greg." "What?" Lucy asked, shocked. "Yes," Jason confirmed. "But they didn't make it. The plane they were on crashed in the Pacific Ocean this morning. You may have seen it on the news." "Oh no," said Lucy. "Do you know if they survived?" "I don't think anyone survived," he said. "I'm really sorry," Lucy said. "Please accept my condolences, and thanks for letting me know. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the company provides life insurance to all employees. I'll start the paperwork tomorrow morning, but I'll need some documentation from the airline. Can you provide that?" "Yes, I'll do my best," he said. "I have a question for you." "Which one?" asked Lucy. "Did you know that Karen was cheating with Greg?" he asked. "I suspected something was going on." "There were rumors, but nothing concrete," Lucy replied. "We don't usually gossip about these things in the office." "I see," he said. "Thanks for the info. I'll contact you." "Thank you," she said. "And again, please accept my condolences." "Thank you," Jason replied, ending the call. That evening, while he and Christy were watching television, a news report about the crash appeared. The report stated that the final moments of the flight were recorded by a crew member of a cargo ship, which was only a couple of miles from the crash site. The network showed amateur video footage clearly capturing the plane descending quickly, nose down. It seemed as if the plane had disintegrated upon impact with the water. The report mentioned that the cargo ship had changed course to search for survivors, pulling several bodies from the water, but no one had survived. A lot of luggage was also recovered, including Karen and Greg's. However, their bodies were never found. The next few months were stressful for Jason and Christy. She moved in with Jason and sold her house. Jason had a lot to deal with, including Karen's condo. There was nothing there that he wanted to keep, so he donated everything to Goodwill, who gladly accepted it. He ended up selling the condo, recouping the amount Karen had originally paid for it. Both Jason and Christy received insurance checks of $1,500,000 each from Acme Real Estate for the deaths of their spouses. Christy moved in with Jason, and they immediately began removing all traces of Karen. Photos were taken down, knickknacks were packed away, and furniture, especially the bed, was replaced. Jason allowed family members to take whatever they wanted. The rest, including 2 cars, was either sold, donated to Goodwill, or disposed of. Jason also had to go through a lot of paperwork to sort out Karen's bank accounts. After a couple of months and a mountain of paperwork, he received a check for about $1,250,000. Lawyers circled Jason and Christy, hoping to profit from the crash. Further investigation revealed that the crew had misunderstood warnings from the onboard computer and had taken the wrong actions. The plane descended at about 12,000 feet per minute and hit the water at roughly 135 miles per hour, meaning it took just over 3 minutes to crash into the ocean. Karen's last 3 minutes, some of which she spent on the phone with Jason, must have been hell, he thought. Her final act, a plea for forgiveness, was no doubt prompted by the knowledge that she was falling to her death, and there was nothing anyone could do. Still, he thought, it was too little, too late. Fortunately, the airline settled all claims with the victims' families, paying out just over $1,175,000 for each passenger. As a result, Jason and Christy received more than $16 million after all calculations. Of course, the IRS took their share, but they were still left with a very decent nest egg. Since Karen and Greg's bodies were never found, there was no need for a funeral, but Jason and Christy held memorial services, mostly for the sake of family members. None of them shed tears for their deceased spouses. 3 months after the service, Christy quit her job and went to work for Jason. By that time, they were madly in love with each other. One evening, while having dinner at a local Texas Roadhouse restaurant, Jason got down on one knee and proposed. Christy squealed with joy, and the surrounding patrons applauded. "It's time to make an honest woman out of me," she whispered in his ear. "Why?" he asked. "Because you're going to be a dad," she said. He covered her face with kisses. "I love you so much," he told her. "I love you more," she replied. "Only one condition," she added. "Which one?" he asked. "Please don't ask me to fly anywhere," she said. He laughed and hugged her tightly. "Don't worry, honey," he said. "What do you think of today's story?" "I think friend Ron did what a true friend would do in telling his husband what he saw." What is your impression of the story? Write in the comments. See you in the comments.